on Tullow Oil, and some of his investors actually bailing out on them right now. And Kenya also is revealing that 3-year 469 billion shillings oil investment roadmap is what is needed. Kenya will need at least 469 billion shillings for commercial oil production, according to today's Business Daily. And it says that that is oil production in the Turkana well if it is to realize its petrodollar dream amid the exit of exploration farms. And there's a breakdown here of the shares, how they were doled out. That is Turkana Oil Project initial ownership. Total and Africa Oil each had 25% stake in venture, 50% owned by Tullow. We had 25% Total Energies and 25% Oil Africa. And interestingly as well is this particular piece that was there in 2019, September 2019, from the Nairobi Law Monthly. And it says that on February 16th, 2010, Platform Resources Inc., that is PRI, sold out its production sharing contracts in the Kenya's Block 12A to Centric Energy Corporation, CEC, at the price of $3.6 million, I should say. And that was 288 million shillings at the rate of 80 shillings per dollar to the shilling then. In a subsequent transaction, Platform offloaded another PSC in Block 13T to Centric Energy for $3.65 million, 292 million shillings. And it says the corporate taxes due on the first transaction charged at 37.5% for foreign companies and 18.75% for the local ones were $1.35 million and $675,000. The tax due to on the second transaction at the same rate would be 109.5 million shillings and 57.75 million shillings respectively. 6 months later, in August 2010, Centric sold out its controlling interest 100% in ordinary shares to Africa Oil Corporation at $24.75 million. Tullow Oil then bought out the production sharing contract in Block 12A and 13T, held by Centric at $23.75 million, accruing corporate taxes worth 178 billion shillings. In 2012, Turkana Drilling Consortium Limited sold out its production sharing contract in Block 10BB to Tullow Oil at $10 million. The taxes due on that transaction were about $4 million. The International Finance Corporation in August 18, 2015 bought 6.83% of Africa Oil Corporation for $50 million, roughly $5 billion at current exchange rate. These transactions attracted corporate tax in the amount of $2.8 billion, $2.8 billion $5. And it goes on to say that in subsequent transaction, Maersk Oil BV, which had entered into a running partnership with Tullow because of its expertise in maritime transport and royal haulage, acquired 25% controlling stake through firm into the production sharing contract of Africa Oil Corporation, $985 million. The outstanding amount that KRA, to save you the long story, that is owed by, that is KRA's, or Tullow is supposed to be giving and lending, or actually submitting to KRA, is 16 billion shillings as of 2019. And in light of what we have, with investors are going away, I don't know the intricate details about this as well, but Patrick, you can actually tell us if KRA is seeking to bolster his tax base as it is, with this eye-popping figure as well, in comparison to what was happening to Kereshe and all. You can talk about incentives and tax reliefs for these partners who are coming to invest in these countries, but also the question of on which part of the law is it pegged?
This is a complex case because when you talk about exploration, what I'm doing is I'm selling a potential outcome.
Right.
I'm not selling a product. Yeah? So when somebody farms in...
You're selling hope.
I'm selling hope. That's all I'm doing. Because what I've done is I've spent so much money exploring. And I think there is oil down there, or I found it, whatever it is, and I think there is so much. So somebody is saying this reserve, these proven reserves are worth so much. Right? So what you're selling is a concept to somebody else. Yeah? And as you go from, there are 3 P's that we normally have in exploration. It is possible, probable, proven, and ones that we can extract. And that is how the probability gets better and better. And every time you do this, you are selling something that you think is there technically. But you haven't actually done any work. You're not producing anything.
Right.
Yeah? So if I sold you a shamba, just land, how much tax do I pay on selling land? Yet somebody knows that that land can produce maize or whatever, something worth so much. So all I'm selling you is just a promise that this land can produce X. So this is what oil production is, the oil exploration up to the time you produce is all about selling an intangible asset until such time as you start producing at that point in time. How do you tax that? Under what law?
How do you tax hope?
How do you tax
Yeah.
hope?
How do you
And
tax hope?
I'm not a tax expert. And I think this whole intricacy here is around the issue of farming, and is farming when you're farming into a company that has got potential.
You see, at the time, KRA also demanded tax from Africa Oil. You remember?
Yes.
And both of them, I think it went all the way to the tax tribunal, and it went to the court. The one of Africa Oil, I think they lost, KRA lost in the court.
Yeah.
But I think the issue on Tolo at the time, the tax is about the sale of a capital asset. You know, when you're owning a block with some, and you have sold that block, the stories you've been reading, you've seen selling to this, selling
Yes,
to
yes,
that.
yes, yes.
That is where the tax was. For KRA, that was deemed to be a capital asset. And there's VAT payable on those transactions.
Yeah.
Those are the taxes that KRA was trying to follow.
Yes. Yes.
And
So it's not only exploration.
At the time, I think Tolo's arguments were we are not VAT registered and stories, and they were trying to get. But I don't know how it ended. But yeah, so you know, KRA knows, and these things about tax. You know, sometimes you find in very high-profile cases, then the tax gets withdrawn. You don't know for some reasons, and in other high-profile cases, the tax becomes. You've seen the other day what's happening. The government saying, you know, under the 10 years of President Uhuru, 400, 600 billion was given as a tax relief. Those things are all misleading stories, really. You know, in business everywhere in the world, tax authorities provide tax incentives and tax reliefs legally, and they're provided for, you know, in law.
In law, yeah. It's not just with
So when you
Yep.
have an institution like KRA making a decision on a matter today, and then 5 years later another government comes to power and says, no, why did you give the ban? KRA now says, okay, we're opening up that case. I mean, you cannot. These are some of the things which will become a challenge for any investor in this country. You've seen this case regarding breweries and many others that have been mentioned in the papers. You know, opening up decisions which have been made by the same institutions previously, you know, and they're anchored in law. But because now for politics, you have to reopen all those things. I think some of these things. So I don't know about what has happened in Chulo, but a lot of our decisions in this country are still predicated on the political expediency, and so, you know.
My take is debate.
Just to give you that, the production sharing contract normally has details on that. Now, those production sharing contracts have never been made public.
Of course.
Yeah?
That has to be
Because
noticed.
therein, if there are any tax reliefs and everything else, they are normally contained in that contract. Right? And that production sharing contract has got clauses that as you change from one status to another, there are mechanisms that change you from one status to the other. Now, they must have in that the agreements as to if you change from one status to another, how do you treat that change? Those PSCs actually should be made public. That's my view.
They should be made.
That's
They
the
should be
most
made
important
public.
thing in the oil industry.
In the whole of
Yeah.
modern contracts now with the oil industry
Yeah.
are actually public, right? And I think perhaps as a country we should bite the bullet and just say we intend to make them public. How do we go through that process and go through it, and just say this is what Kenya wants to do, and whether it is Dalo, whether it is whoever it is, and all of them, in fact, by the requirements of where they're getting their money, they should actually make it public. It is us as a country that don't want it to be public.
I think the fundamental question, Diba, we should be asking ourselves, with all this, and it's a confused saga, and the premise is there are no economics of scale. That, to me, is the basic. The fundamental question perhaps we need to address ourselves too, has this process really costed the taxpayer? What has been the impact on the taxpayer? If it's Patrick and Bill here in their own private selling blocks, I have no problem. But if we committed ourselves as a Kenyan government and certain resources were used, we probably have something in it. And probably, in my view, it's a confused discussion here, and perhaps it doesn't deserve them. I know you are running the program. Maybe it doesn't have the airtime we are giving it at all. If they are hyenas within themselves who are messing each other, why are they?
But
if it actually has impact on our coffers.
Bilo is paying land rents because he was speculating that there's so many people we saw that were actually buying huge trucks, expensive lands there because of these activities and exploration as well. Kenyans will be affected, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see where it comes in, and even when
maybe even Patrick, because I know is the interest of oil also has been
maybe resources for the people of Kenya. Government should be willing to share. We are only reading in international news. The oil reserves in Kenya is 2.8 billion barrels. This one is like it is. Government cannot even present to its parliament. This is what we have discovered. These are the potential, viable quantities we have. This is the deal we want to go into. I mean, why is it so difficult for folks in government? Because that is where people make money. You remember in Nigeria, all these things about the Sani Abacha's stories and how the money is being taken out. It is this PSC. Because when you are doing those things, then you have got people who are going to be paid inside there and you don't want it to be known. There's a consultant on the deal, there's this on that, and there's that. And so there you are covering up a lot of things. And this is the sad thing about in oil. That's why many countries have challenges in getting oil really into exporting, because of the politics around oil is huge. And so, but it's unfortunate. Anyway, this guy says in 3 years we'll be exporting. Let's hope
in 3 years.
Listens to Patrick. Well, when he says in 3 years,
Yes,
I'll do 120,000.
that's what I'm saying. In 3 years, of course.
I originally said 2025, so that's about right. But now I've changed mine to beyond 2025.
When I was teaching at USIU, and you'd ask the student, what is Vision 2030? They say, maybe. Maybe it will produce.
Yeah.
All right.
So I think 2025 is still ambitious, if it happens at all. That's my.
But the tone and tenor of the conversation should be changing towards fossil fuel. So
Should be changing away from fossil fuels. I think if you talk about using that as a means of moving around, I think it's not right. We should be talking about using that as a raw material for much bigger value addition. And then what you do, and that is where now the climate change issues come in, you have what is called carbon capture and sequestration. Yeah? Whereby once you're doing all that, any of this climate change gases, greenhouse gases and all the rest of it, you control them in the process. Yeah? As you're getting that value. So therefore, you are not contributing to the climate change factors. And these can all be done, but you can only do them when you've got a massive scale facility that will pay for the capture of those climate harming materials, and you store them somewhere. And it happens. People are finding caves where they used to take salt out in those many years, hundreds of years back, yeah? And they're pumping carbon dioxide back into those caves and storing them there. Because carbon dioxide one day they're thinking one day it will become a raw material for something else. So it is possible, but it needs huge investments. And the volume of oil that we have currently, if you're going to do what you're going to do, does not generate enough money to ensure that it's going to be climate neutral. And that's really what we have to look at, is to look at how can we use that raw material, that resource, in a climate neutral manner to add value.
And even
that's
when
the discussion.
Even when the CF says you need about 3.4 billion US investment for the infrastructure, should we actually be talking of this 3.4 billion to go to food production, or really going to where we don't even have enough reserves? I think to me that's the question at the end of the day. Is a priority spending 3.4 billion in infrastructure of where we are not even sure, where we are selling hope, really, than investing this kind of money in making infrastructure for food production? I think to me that probably will be the basic question as a government makes that decision.
But Patrick, you're in this industry, you know, from my knowledge, when it comes to oil, those companies that want to invest, like Tullow and others, you know, you can actually build all the infrastructure and all the costs that is required and recoup from the future inflows.
Yes.
You know, and that's what happens.
Moving, yeah.
Yes. You don't have to, as a government, pay anything.
Right.
If you are ready to sign and say, okay, first 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, recover your money. We sit down and calculate. We are going to get 100,000 tons per day production. Then, you know, it's easy. That's what they do in most of these countries. Saudis and all these countries, that's how they started. For years, they have been running and recovering. Gradually, it's like a lease. So as you take, as the amount of money reduces, you take ownership. Your percentage increases. Yes.
It's lease to own.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The government doesn't need to get involved
at
all, unless it wants to extract value earlier.
Yeah.
Then it invests like any other investor, and you get into that kind of area. Yeah. But it is a risky investment. That's the key thing. Let somebody else deal with it.
Take the risk. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's look at what is happening with Safaricom right now, and the plans to actually set up smartphone factory, according to Business Daily yesterday. Plan to make between 1.2 million and 1.4 million gadgets. Telcos fights taxes in Finance Bill 2023, and that is according to some of the revenues that were given here, with the M-Pesa leading so far. And it says that Safaricom has revealed that it is setting up a factory in Kenya which will assemble between 1.2 million shillings and 1.4 million, 1.2 million, not shillings, and 1.4 million smartphones a year, making it one of the biggest players lining up to implement President William Ruto's plan of producing Africa's cheapest gadget. And appearing before the National Assembly's Finance and Planning Committee yesterday, Telco put up a spirited fight against new taxes on mobile phones as contained in the Financial Bill 2023, arguing that it will be impossible to achieve the target price of a $50 smartphone, that is 6,850 shillings, since the proposed taxes will raise the cost of locally assembled smartphones to 11,500. If we were to work with the President's vision of a $50 phone, we need to address the question of import, excise, and output. That is a value-added tax for me to save 4,000 shillings and bring down the cost from 11,500 to 7,500. Mr. Karanja Gishiri, head of Safaricom, it continues on page 2. So let me just get it right, so that head of Safaricom Venture told the MPs during the public hearing on Finance Bill. Bill, what do you think about this latest movement? And of course, Finance Bill also seems to be a choking point. Ambitious plan, still a stalemate with the Finance Bill, giving a tripping wire there.
I think what the Safaricom is doing makes sense. I mean, look, it's saying, let us not put the cart before the horse. You want taxes? Let us invest. Let us create jobs. Let us,
Right.
generate incomes. Then you can get more taxes and more revenue. But creating a higher tax environment would reduce our competitiveness, because the telecom industry is highly competitive. There are countries that, are already so advanced, and economies of scale and all that. So I think it makes sense. If, the government needs to create jobs. They want to attract investors. I think the areas where you need to look at and say, okay, you balance out, and defer some of the things that you want to do with the money. Our question in this country is that government doesn't want to look at the expenditure side of their budget completely. It's like that's a no-go area, no discussion. You'll not see any discussion on the side of expenditure in government. It's always on revenue. We want the money, and I think so. It doesn't. You cannot, in one hand, want to grow investments, you want to grow incomes, you want to grow employment, and enhance competitiveness, and on the other, you are introducing, higher taxes, higher cost of energy, other costs that will reduce the competitiveness and the profitability. So why would anybody put that factory here? So tomorrow Safaricom will say, we'll put our factory in Ethiopia. Mm-hmm. The cost of power is cheaper there, the cost of labor is cheaper, the cost of tax is cheaper. Everything would be cheaper for them. So I think you are driving away, and this is what Kenya Association of Manufacturers and KEPSA was saying yesterday to Parliament, that this is going to drive away even current investors. Forget about bringing new investors. So I agree with Telkom that I think government needs to look at some of these measures.
And if you look at China 20 years ago, what did they do? They were attracting all the manufacturing facilities from around the world into China. And that's what grew the Chinese economy. But at that time, what did China do? They built this massive hydroelectric scheme to power their industry, because people were saying coal is bad. So they built a huge hydro, I think the largest in the world, Three Gorges Dam. Yeah, and that power, whatever it is, they offered incentives for people to come in. Labor was cheap, etc., etc. Right now, nobody wants to put factories in China because it's expensive. And that's the natural evolution of any country. You make it very cheap, people come in, they pump a lot of money in, they invest in facilities and so forth. There's also transfer of technology, because your people are learning and they have to learn, and they have to, they can't bring in their expensive people. They teach your people how to do stuff. And eventually, you then begin to now develop IP that you can then move forward. That's exactly what China has done.
And they're now focusing on their own internal demand to grow their economy.
Exactly,
to
grow their
economy.
economy.
About outside so much.
Yeah.
Their own 700 million people have gone up.
Their wealth, so they've created wealth and everything else.
Enough. So all the,
And China itself is now looking for manufacturing locations outside China.
Yes.
And Kenya is losing an opportunity. If we had the right incentives like China had 20 years ago in this country, China would be coming to put factories in Kenya. In fact, they are doing that. There are a lot of quiet Chinese companies coming into Kenya. Yeah, nobody's blowing whatever it is, but they're doing it under shady conditions. That's why you're not hearing about it.
I think my take here is, and the gentleman from Safaricom is clear. There's a gap here we are not explaining. A gap here, there's a talk here, and there's another reality here. And this reality is being brought by this. Since the time I started following the budgets, and it's some years back, I've never seen a budget which has brought a lot of debate than 2003 and 2004. And there's so much tremendous debate on it. And then you're saying here, we want to get a $50 smartphone. But here, you're telling me you have to pay these taxes on it. So there's a conflict here in terms of what we want and the reality. Picking on Bill, it's a fantastic idea. I was sharing yesterday even with my classmate. We are classmates on the long side of the boat. And there's a way to go. We're really looking at, and we have been talking since we're here, how do we encourage local investors in quotes? And Safaricom, if you go to the down of it, we have invested there as Kenyans. So when we go to this other, we are creating opportunities, really. And the whole idea, I'm not quite sure whether I would borrow, say, Patrick word cheap. But the government has a responsibility to make the investment, the opportunities you get when you invest attractive.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. How do I make attractive for investors to come here? That's your business. Now, if you look at what is happening in Rwanda, they are doing the phone already. It's not at those prices we are talking about. So if we sat down as government and say, yes, let's look at the maths of it. Safaricom gets into this. What opportunities are they going to create within the Kenyans? And you notice here, the labor costs are cheaper relative to the developed economies. You can leverage on that. We have a lot of young
Not only
graduates.
the labor costs, but Safaricom is the leading fintech company in the world.
Yeah.
Is a pace setter. So the opportunities we have really for Safaricom should never be underestimated.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you.
We are getting a lot of graduates.
This institution
Yeah.
has the opportunity to transform this country if we give them the right environment really to work in.
Look at this Denard Kimadi, something they actually started the other day there. Those are the fellas who will make these smartphones. So what are you giving? You're giving opportunities for graduates. And there's a lot of graduates out there. So it's a light thing to do, but we need to step back as a government and say, yes, we recognize you're a local investor. These are the incentives.
Yeah.
All right. But is this particular decision by Safaricom also prompted by the push by CBK for the unbundling of M-Pesa and Safaricom? So, and Safaricom, if they have just left with the voice data and the SMS, that will actually affect their business adversely. So, setting up shop could be a viable way of also the other branch of Safaricom surviving.
I think any business that is run correctly will always look at new opportunities for raising money, right? And when you're looking now at the market for mobile phones, for the devices, whatever, not in Kenya. Think of Ethiopia. Think of Kenya. Think of Uganda, Tanzania, right? This is within the East African community. How many mobile phones are bought at a given time, right? And if you can bring down the cost of a smartphone to something that people can afford, it means that a lot more people are going to buy them. And what does it do? It generates opportunities for business because now people have got smartphones, they can use more apps, they can use more whatever, and that data that you're using on that thing is what is now the big business in Safaricom. It's no longer voice, it's data, right? And also moving into financials, right? Now go to Ethiopia. How many people are in Ethiopia who are not yet served by smartphones? A large number.
Absolutely.
So if I'm thinking ahead, I'd be actually putting that thing up.
Yeah.
And as Pedro said, I'd rather put it up in Ethiopia than here.
Yeah. It's like actually
because that is where I'd take it, because my biggest market, my evolving market is going to be in Ethiopia and probably Sudan and places like that, which are still currently not very open. So I'd put it there because I'd be given the incentives.
I don't know which is the date is today. Look at the opportunity they have got when DRC joined the East African community.
Yeah.
Branches there, opportunities. They are moved there. And I don't understand the ball game here. If you look at EBL, it starts from the farmer, Barry. They move from the farmer up to the bar when you take your task. They have all that chain controlling it. Look at our friend Vimar Shah with what do you call it, his company? The one of
Bidco.
Mm-hmm. Even up to the farm level, the kind of products they want. Mm-hmm. So this idea of saying Safaricom, you can't do this and you can't do that, you don't really understand where it's coming. Unless Patrick and I want to take a part of that business, which I'll bet we can't do it well.
You know, a good business does what you call backwards and forwards integration.
Indeed.
You start somewhere and then you start integrating both ways.
Mm-hmm. Those are the ones I could get backward and forward integration. That's it.
So an organization like that started off selling voice, phones, and they're buying that from somebody else. So if you want to work both ways, now you're going to go into making phones yourself. Then you go back and say, fine, to make a phone, what do I need? There are certain components I need to make a phone.
Right.
You go back into the manufacture of those components. And those components are not just for phones, they're for computers, they're for everything else, yeah? So as you sort of do backward integration, you find that there are more opportunities opening up in there, and you're serving other people. And as a business, if you want to expand, you've got to start looking at
And
your
the
full
beauty
value
of
chain.
the beauty of Safaricom is not going to treasury. Give us money. We can do it.
Yeah.
So why are you stopping the obvious? Why are you breaking it? What do you call it? Breaking when it's not broken.
Yeah.
Just move on.
And
No,
fixing it.
The British,
Fixing it when it's not broken.
the British will say it's being penny wise and pound
But-
foolish.
And pound foolish.
Because when you are looking at collecting taxes only, you don't see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
You are generating revenues, you are generating employment, income.
Yeah.
I mean, look at how much Samsung contributes to the economy of South Korea. It's huge. I'm telling you. These
This the
things.
phone, this the TV.
I mean,
you're
so,
breaking in your room.
so yeah. So this is, and Kenya is the youth we have in this country. They are adept at these issues of IT. Really, very, and this is a hub. Kenya is one of the leading hubs in fintech and in terms of startups on technology. So we need to leverage on that. And if a company like Safaricom says we want to go into this is an opportunity that you should not lose. It should be government should be telling them, what can we do for you guys? We can't even give you free money. Well, they don't have money, but they should allow these guys to operate with minimum, regulatory and tariff, tax, whatever.
A lot of young people, I think there's this program that we've been doing, the KEPS has been doing with the government called Ajira. The Ajira program, where you're actually training young people in the digital process, and then they're beginning to do work remotely.
Yeah.
And quite a few of them are getting work outside Kenya on a digital basis.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And what are they using? This device, a mobile phone. They can actually work on it. So, but a mobile phone is not the best, but they can work on it. What they need actually are tablets, right? And they can work anywhere.
You know, Patrick,
So if you can make these at an affordable rate for these guys, and
Right.
you're talking about going, to the bottom to get guys to do work.
Patrick.
This is what you need.
Ethiopia has been making their own phones. You know
Yeah.
that. For
Yes.
the last, they've not been buying these things.
Yeah.
They're all living in Nairobi. You've seen their phones.
Yeah.
Very cheap, very efficient for their own purpose. Not
Yeah.
smartphones, but they do.
Yeah.
And they've been using it for all the time we've been buying phones. Also, they've been making their own phones. So I think we will be left behind.
If
We'll
I'm
be
left
this
behind,
region
yeah.
we have been left
Yeah.
behind from X to everything. I think we're going to be
We
left
start off
behind.
with a good idea. We don't really
Yes,
build upon it.
yes.
Someone comes and build upon it and
turns away with it.
makes it
But-
efficient.
but-
Yeah.
So
But-
you go back to the story of Kenya and Singapore in 1963.
Yes.
But I'm happy.
Korea, sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy
Korea.
coming to from the private sector, and it's a very interesting saying in town, saying that if your business cannot work in a cell phone, forget it. Don't start that business. It will not go very far. But I must take this cell phone and do the business with it. Period.
Yeah.
That's it. But that's where we had it. Yeah.
Now, 210 billion shillings lost in a month. Safaricom's, in the Nairobi Security Exchange, have capital flight. How does it really portend for also Safaricom currently? I think this is the first loss that we've had, the biggest ever for Safaricom that they've recorded.
That's loss of value. It's not loss of money.
It's not loss of money.
It's the loss of value on the stock exchange. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is NSC. That is me, the shareholder, who is holding Safaricom shares. I'm not.
But it's got a cascading effect,
Not on
No.
the company.
moving forward.
No, not on the company, but
No.
on me as an investor who has bought shares in that company, right? At the moment, on paper, I have lost that money. But for a long time, I have been gaining from the amount I bought because, there was, the value of money in this country was increasing more than it was in the US and whatever it is. Now you look at the Fed in the US, they're beginning to allow interest rates to creep up. What does that do? It makes it better to invest on that side. So people are taking their money to go back there. And there, predictability is better than it is here.
And
Right? Yeah, so
And another reason, let me, I think it's good to put this thing in perspective.
yeah.
The reason why the shares of these blue chip companies going down in Nairobi Stock Exchange has to do with the business environment.
Yeah.
It has to do with the economy.
Yeah.
When the economy is not doing very well, the business environment is bad, the companies are not performing well, the sentiment is expressed in the share value in the market. Of course, the flight of capital also from the Nairobi Stock Exchange, from our capital markets to the Western countries because of the improved performance on their markets is
markets.
another factor, and that has been happening for the last 1 year. I mean, but more importantly, I think we need to be concerned as a government, the performance of our capital markets, like Stock Exchange. That's something that the government should be concerned. When you find, the capitalization going down because of the values, there's a reason, there's a flight.
So
and so it's not about an individual company, it's about the environment.
The environment.
Really, yes.
Yeah. And for a long time, money was coming here.
Yes.
Because things were worse out there.
Yeah,
Not because things were good here,
yes.
but it's because they were worse out there.
Yes.
Right? And now things have begun to improve.
So this is the inverse now.
Yeah, it's the inverse is happening. Yeah.
Yes.
In that situation, and here it's getting worse. And so people are taking it out there.
And Patrick, something like the one we were just discussing.
Yeah.
Has an impact even on the share value. For example, if Safaricom tomorrow gets a nod from the government on the issue of the taxes on the new plans, you see the impact. People will start investing.
It will just.
But if the government says no, there'll be taxes on telecom, and Safaricom now pulls out from the manufacturing, those sets, it will impact also negatively on their performance. When you see pressure by the government, you must split the M-Pesa from the whatever. All these things have an impact really, and at the end of the day.
That is why I think when you look at some of the more established economies, the people who are pulling the strings are away from politics. There's a few think tanks that are sitting there that government believes in.
Right.
And these people see the bigger picture, and they're able to not just look at the country, they're able to look at that with the respect of the global economy. And they're telling you these things are happening here and there and whatever it is, and this is the impact here. If we do this, this is what will happen, and so forth and so on. Right? And those think tanks in Washington, in London, in Tokyo, wherever it is, are known. And people go to ask them, what do you think is going to happen? And they put their money based on the information those guys have, because they're not only very knowledgeable, but some of the things they do drive that change. And like now, people are taking their money back to the US and everything else. That was a deliberate activity by this group of people who are sitting there to just say, let's shift this, let's shift that, let's shift this, and see what happens in our economy. And then people begin to bring money back. Yeah. So we should not, as a country, be the proverbial ostrich with the head in the sand. We need to understand that internally there's a lot of things that we need to do in order to attract investment, in order to attract people to come onto the stock exchange, in order to attract tourists to come, in order to attract X, Y, and Z. It is the look and feel of the country that attracts people. It's not the noise that we make.
And it's a very interesting discussion, and I do remember with a lot of nostalgia when Uchumi was going down. No investors who wanted to come and revamp, the opportunities were there. It was viable. But the moment, and this is speaking further of what Patrick is saying, the moment an investor comes and you tell him, up front, I need 1 billion, forget it. I've not even made anything, but you're telling before you can give me this opportunity, this must be on the table. That was Safaricom. Sorry, Uchumi. The whole thing of Dodora, where you generate power from it. The street lights, the governor, they say, unless this is on the table, they are not smart street lights in Nairobi. So the difference here, this business advisors, they are advising business to prosper, make profits, and they benefit from there. Not really saying, I want a cut out of it, but it's not growing at all. And that's a narrative perhaps we need to address as when we look at businesses. How do you make the business grow? And being owning that through securities market, I benefit from that. But your advice is the way to go, as opposed, I want something upfront. And that has been our biggest challenge, really. And Adam Smith was very clear. Let the government pull back, but provide the environment to work. You have no business doing business in government at all. But you regulate that business. All right. If you unpack some of this business, you find a hand in the politics in them.
Right. In terms of volumes of shares, even on the Nairobi Security Exchange as it is, if we have this capital flight, and we know Safaricom has been sort of a fulcrum and a linchpin in the Nairobi Security Exchange, what does it portend for the money market?
That is a harbinger of bad things to come, right? It's not just the NSC, but you're talking about also your whole financial sector and stuff like that that is happening in that place. Yeah, even the government, in terms of trying to get bonds and whatever it is, trading bonds on the market here, that's going to become difficult. Yeah, because who's going to buy them?
I can see already we have 300 proposals for the Eurobonds. Huh?
Keep who is the chair of NSC and said here that it's a barometer of what's happening in the country.
Yeah.
So why are we shocked when we see this fight?
Yeah.
It's a barometer of what happened. And the investors out there, their ears and eyes are open. So they know where to.
The people who want to buy Eurobonds, those people are sharks. They're loan sharks. Almost like we have them here. They will come in with some serious terms, and that's what they do. And countries have been brought on their knees by people who have bought a country's debt.
Yeah.
The countries have been brought on their knees, and those guys can demand all sorts of stuff. And when they do, the thing that happens, your rating on the S&P and all these whatever it is, and all this rating whatever it is,
The Moody's
and all the rest of it, begin to go right down because those guys make so much noise about the fact that you can't pay
actually
them
go
back.
to distress.
A country goes to distress as a result of doing that. So if you want to sell Eurobonds to these guys, these loan sharks in the global markets, those guys have got the real patient capital. They'll sell it to you at a high rate, right? And they'll be willing to give you, what do you call that? A period where you're not going to do anything. Yeah, they just hold it, and then you have to pay at a very, very high rate. And if you don't, they have no scruples. They don't care whether it is Kenya or the US or whatever it is. They'll just say, I want my money, this country is defaulting. And they're defaulting on this thing which you bought in good faith, etc., etc., etc. And they make noise.
I was interested in this.
So that idea of selling the Eurobonds to somebody else, I would treat it with a lot of caution. It sounds great, to sort of, it's like just, getting money from somebody else to pay somebody else. You're just delaying the pain. But the more you delay, the more expensive it is.
And you know what happened the other day? IMF come knocking. Right now it has gone to 4 African countries. They just had a deal yesterday with Ivory Coast. They're in Ghana. They're in Lusaka. They are here. So all this happened, then who comes to save you?
IMF.
And that saving, God knows what it means. I've asked you, the team here before, give me a country where IMF has a program and that country has got off dogs. One country. In the world, one country where IMF kicks in and that country today is out of dogs. I can see you're thinking hard.
I'm trying to think.
When IMF stopped lending money to Kenya in the Moi era, the country was able to survive.
Right.
And actually grew internally. It's like South Africa with apartheid. When people stopped whatever, dealing with South Africa, look at what happened. South Africa grew as an economy, seriously, and they became innovative because they were isolated.
And Diba, we need to unpack this thing called GDP. It's so interesting. You're given a program here that your taxation is pegged on the GDP, right? And therefore, African countries are doing very well in GDP. So we need to raise the taxes. You get my narrative?
Yes.
One of the drivers of GDP is how you're doing well with exports and imports.
Yeah.
But if you look at that variable, which defines the GDP, Kenya is doing poorly. The trade deficit is all going down. You wonder, what is this about the GDP? Well, that we are sung by the World Bank, we're sung by IMF, that you African, you're doing a 7.5. We hit minus 3% during COVID. Next year we did 6%. How is that?
Government spending.
How?
Government spending. Your
Let me
GDP.
tell you. Our GDP You know, when you're in these third world countries, developing countries in third world, it's not very easy to measure some of these statistics.
True.
Because 80% of our economy is subsistence.
Yeah.
You know, all these things you see Kenya Bureau of Statistics churning out is in a very small sector of the country's economy, the modern sector that Patrick represents. This is the 80%, which is informal, is not even captured. They just put an estimate. So when you say the GDP, for example, in Kenya, President Uhuru, in his last few years, he debased it. He rebased it twice.
Yes,
he rebased it twice by 30%. You know, he said our GDP is low. We increased it by 25%. And then he came around after a few years and said our GDP is add another 5%. So the thing, you know, it's automatically what it means is now all those other factors that they will change. So our tax as a percentage of GDP went down from 19 to 20%, down to 14% because of that rebasing, simply. It doesn't mean we were not paying taxes. We were still paying that tax, and the tax was growing. But because you increase the denominator, you know, then the percentage goes down immediately. So I mean, these things for statistics is very easy to make, but there is no doubt in my mind, personally, that we are still one of the highest tax-paying countries in Africa. And if you look at all kinds of taxes, whether it's corporation tax, whether it's VAT, of course we have been very crafty. Our VAT, he'll tell you, in the last 10 years of Uhuru and Kibaki, they've got crafty ways of getting around it. So instead of touching that percentage, you create levies. That levy, this levy, that levy, when you add up eventually, our VAT or levies which are on goods and services are in excess of 21%.
But you know, Prof has been also a huge proponent of, or totally against GDP.
Yes,
and he's always been proposing that we go for the purchasing power parity and the G coefficient.
Yes,
yes. But you've always been saying this on this table.
Yes.
Why can't you book an appointment with the CS Treasury and go and say we need to change the way we normally pay and use this metric of GDP to
I know
purchasing power parity or G coefficient.
I know Prof for many years because
I don't get audience at all.
I know Prof.
I know that for the academia.
I know Prof for a long year because we have been team together, but
he has to join IMF first.
And then arrive.
If I'm talking to Patrick, if I'm going to talk to Patrick, and Patrick doesn't want to listen to me, then there's no point of talking with Patrick. You get. And it was interesting things that, Bill, I'm going the point you are raising, that the CS was telling us, in East Africa we're the most highly taxed. We are not taxed as the others. I think that's not the discussion. Uganda or Tanzania, fair enough, you say they're taxing us the more. But what do they do with that taxation? That's a question. That's the important thing. And that's what we're saying. We, the revenue side, we are every day, revenue side. But when we get it, how are we utilizing that revenue? I think that's the question we need to really address. And Kenyans, people are willing to pay taxes as long as you see what they do. And we have said that very, very, very much indeed.
Thank you. I want us just to wind up on this particular note. In terms of asset sweating, I can see Kenya Pipeline now is doing well because now they're saying from oil to water. These pipes that have actually KPC stopped using the 14-inch 450 kilometers pipeline in December 2020. Now they want to actually use those pipelines for transmitting, transmission.
Where are they getting the water from?
They contracted a company at 4 billion shillings to get them out or something, is it?
To do what?
To get those pipes out. It was going to cost them 4 billion.
That was what they...
That was the proposal. No,
that
it's
was
not
the
really
proposal.
working.
Now they're saying, should you spend money to take it out? Why don't you use it?
Yeah.
That's a switch in thinking, which is smart.
Which is smart.
Yeah. But
how can this water, if it's the pipeline is in Mombasa
to Nairobi.
Mombasa to Nairobi.
Yeah. So you take water from Nairobi to Mombasa. Mombasa is got a deficit of water.
Oh, the other way around.
It's the other way around.
It's actually the other way.
Yeah, it's going the other way. So you take water from Nairobi.
Why can't you do that pipeline from Musima Springs? Why this natural well of water?
That is going to be part of what is going to be put in this pipeline.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah, so you get all these sources of water up country. And you use this pipeline to pump it down to Mombasa.
Yes.
And I hope we can use
But
it.
then what you need there is massive storage.
Yeah, and I hope we can use it for irrigation.
Well, this is
Food production.
This is for drinking water.
I don't think, I think you look at what countries like Saudi Arabia and those countries in the Gulf have done. They have huge, or some of the largest desalination plants in the world.
Right.
And those are the ones on the towns that are on the sea.
On the sea, yeah.
And they're the ones supplying all the way to cities like Riyadh, which are, you know, thousands of kilometers out from the sea. And it has worked. So I think if, well, we rarely see government thinking of those huge things on water. But if they put up a huge desalination plant in Mombasa, that water can supply Nairobi and everywhere else along the way. Wait a minute. Then there was a time of Moi, they had this water from Mount Kilimanjaro, pumped all the way to Tengela. Saitotis water. You remember?
That disappeared.
That is being used in the flower farms in...
Thank you. That water pipeline was supposed to bring water to Nairobi. The water never got here.
Ask Joho.
Ended up in
Ask Joho what happened to the plant the Japanese wanted to do in Mombasa.
A desalination plant.
Yes,
Yeah.
They didn't want it to, and we pushed it in Vision 2030.
On a PPP.
Yeah.
Basis.
No,
No,
it was
commercial.
actually Japanese.
Commercial, okay.
Yes.
And what
Ask
happened?
Joho what happened.
No, we're asking you.
Joe is not here. You're here. You tell us.
I want to get out of this station now.
Gentlemen, I really do appreciate.
No, I wanted to.
Yeah, briefly.
I wanted to say something because it's something I want to pass to the Kenyans. I want to pass to the parents. There's this young man called Didon Levis in the U.S., the guy who saved the bus where the driver had become unconscious.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know why he
yes,
saved
yes.
it? He didn't have a cell phone.
Yes.
All the other kids were busy in their phones. These kids and the parents made a very deliberate choice. Our son will not have cell phone. Please, parents in this country, and I'm really appealing to each one of you, we need to make our children children.
Indeed. And it's all about situational awareness.
Awareness.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that you're also engrossed. People have earphones and headsets, you know, moving around. You can't even hear what is happening around you. Cars are knocking people down because
The first time you hit in you go to a hotel,
Yes.
is a phone. You don't even look at the environment of it. In case of what do I do? But
You know,
you're there.
there's an increase in the frequency of accidents between people walking on the streets.
Bill Okero, businessman and politician, thank you for coming through this morning. We really do appreciate. I also want to thank you, Professor Gituro Wenaina. Thank you for coming through as well. Patrick Avat, thank you for coming through. I really do appreciate. And by the way, there's a sickness that has been named. If you lose your phone, you know, we normally have this anxiety that I've lost my phone. You know what they call it? Nomophobia. Nomophobia. It's called nomophobia.
You're no longer normal.
That is the latest sickness that is now
Right at the top.
the fear
The fear of losing your phone.
of not really having a phone. Nomophobia. Thank you for your valid company. You've been watching Sokoni here. Don't go away. Don't go away. News Diary is up next.